Hi, and welcome to this presentation about the representation of alternative gender identities in children's picture books. Here you are, a snapshot of the structure that I'm going to follow in this presentation. I will start by contextualizing the study that I'm presenting. I will also describe the samples that I have analyzed. I will explain why agency is a crucial aspect when describing male gender identities. I will also look into the methodology that I followed for this analysis and also present some findings that I got and the importance of them in relation to how male identities are constructed in picture books. Children's picture books constitute a fruitful avenue for exploring gender characters. The different meaning-making resources deployed in the interplay of the visual and verbal modes involved in this genre present greater complexity for the analysis of characterization than monomodal genres. This complexity, however, constitutes the main asset of this genre for the treatment of sensitive issues, including challenging gender identities. The way how gender is represented in children's literature contributes to provide a certain model for children. As Frawley points out, gender stereotypes can act as processing filters for children, even altering their accuracy of their information recall and producing fabricated memories in order to reinterpret gendered information more consistently with their already acquired gender stereotypes. For this reason, Frawley recommends teachers to make students aware of those stereotypes so that they can be more cognizant of their own bias and attitudes and recognize their own distorted views and misconceptions in order to debunk together gender stereotypes in schools as places where all stereotypes are challenged rather than perpetuated, as he says. My claim here is that children's picture books are of paramount importance in order to achieve this, as they are liable to be taken as educational vehicles in a variety of ways, as Maria Nikolaeva and Claire Scott contend. Examples in children's and juniors literature where gendering is an element of the story started to appear more than 50 years ago. However, in spite of the long-term production of gender-inclusive literature, studies have reported on the persistence of sexist representations in children's books. For example, by not showing males caring for children or doing house tasks. And interestingly, more conservative representations are sometimes depicted when gender is not the author's main interest in a story. John Stephens contends that fictive representations of maleness do not aim to offer a copy of the existing social order, but rather to model how readers might engage interactively with that social order, so that they offer models of subjectivity to readers, which of course may include traditional conservative models of gender as well. Thus, two relevant questions for Shurva are to what extent texts featuring gender-variant male characters do adequately reflect that complexity of gender identities, and also to what extent can such picture books counter narratives related to traditional masculinity. So the research question I have tried to answer with these studies: how do male protagonists challenge traditional stereotypes of male gender in gender-inclusive picture? The study I'm presenting here is part of a research project about the multimodal discourse in children's picture books, which challenge gender stereotypes and also the traditional concept of family, which is led by Professor Jesús Moya Guijarro from the University of Castilla-La Mancha in Spain, and which has been financially supported by the Spanish government. And my specific task in this project is to explore the multimodal construal of non-normative male protagonists from Halliday's ideational perspective. And here you can see the list of the picture books that I have considered for the analysis that I am presenting here. And these are the 5 protagonists that I have analyzed. Willie from Willie the Champ, William from William's Doll, Oliver from Oliver Button is a Sissy, Nate from Ballerino Nate, and Bailey from 10,000 Dresses. Well, why is agency important? The question is that traditional approaches understand gender identities as binary, thus interpreting people's identities as either male or female. In this essentialist view of gender, agency is associated with male gender and behavior in such a way that participating in actions with a leader role is interpreted as male typical behavior, or natural behavior even, whereas participating with other roles is considered typical of female gender and consequently as male deviant behavior. On the other hand, family and school often represent in these picture books what Stephens considers the cultural formations in which represented participants live their everyday lives, so they constitute what he expresses as the power structures and peer relationships which shape being in the world and interpolate participants into gendered roles. In this sense, the protagonist's agency is crucial in order to be successful in their self-constitution, thus enabling them to contest those power structures when required. Stephens has identified three masculinity schemata in junior fiction called the mommy's boy, the old age boy, and the new age boy, which are defined in terms of variation in the subjective agency represented in each case. The mommy's boy refers to the pampered and privileged child who is to an excessive degree fashioned by his parents, especially his mother, as Stephens explains. This type of schema is meant to depict a character who is docile and still unmanly or unmasculine, and which is absent in the sample of picture books that I have explored, and contrasts greatly with the old age boy, who is, and I'm quoting Stephens, the child who is either aggressive or something of a rascal, self-regarding and physically assertive. Thus, the old age boy is a character who has started to display traits that are consistent with those typically associated, as Stephens points out, with the traditional idea of masculinity in our culture. The subjective agency construed also corresponds to a traditional conception of agency by which the character is associated essentially with an active role, triggering actions and being the main participant in them. For example, the one speaking, making decisions, doing things, etc., rather than with a passive role, the one listening, accepting others' decisions, being done things to, etc. So between the mommy's boy who lacks agency and the old age boy whose agency is associated with self-regardingness and physical assertion, the masculinity schema of the new age boy corresponds to a child who is, and I'm quoting Stephens again, sensitive, creative, imaginative, other-regarding, negotiative. Thus, this schema corresponds to a character who shows subjective agency, but in a different fashion from the old age boy. Stephens describes him as a character whose masculinity is construed in the narration as achieving or disclosing self-awareness, which enables him to take responsibility of his own life. A boy who is creative, who reads for pleasure, and who tends to lack physical prowess and physical courage, though his moral courage and other regardingness will prompt him to act courageously. The analysis that I have carried out has focused on the different forms that protagonists' agencies take when they participate in the actions narrated in each story. In this way, patterns have been found of the subjective agency of each participant. In addition, the analysis has also explored to what extent and in which ways the protagonist's agency varied when interacting with the characters embodying traditional gender stereotyping in the stories narrated, which is typically they are family, peers, classmates, etc. In order to explore how male protagonists are construed visually and verbally in relation to the New Age boy profile, a transitivity analysis has been carried out focusing on the construal of the protagonists as participants with agentive roles. For the analysis of the visual mode, the roles of actor, sayer, and reactor have been considered agentive and tagged in accordance with Crescent van Leuven and also in accordance with Painter, Martin, and Answorth. And similarly, following Halliday, the roles of actor, behavior, sayer, and censor have been identified as agentive versus other non-agentive roles such as goal, phenomenon, or target, and tagged for the verbal mode. This table shows the distribution of the subjective agentive roles of the protagonists as actors, behaviors, sayers, and censors, that is to say, participating in mental processes construed in the verbal mode, or reactors, which involves participating in mental processes construed but in the visual mode, after Crescent van Leuven and Halliday's perspective. Although the total number of agentive roles varies greatly among protagonists, this is just attributable to differences among the narrations. For example, whereas the Oliver Button is Assisi and Ballerina Nate present a similar number of visual figures, 31 and 28 respectively, verbal commitment to the narration is much higher in Ballerina Nate. What matters then in terms of subjective agency profiling is the distribution of role types for each participant, and the differences observed in distribution seem to point to a diversity in the construal of the New Age boy subjective agencies of the protagonist sampled. The role of actor, which traditional binary conceptions of gender consider natural to male gender, is present in all cases, thus confirming Stephen's claim that even in a traditional sense, agency is not the exclusive patrimony of the old age boy. However, this is only one aspect of the protagonist's profiles. Sayer is a salient role for Bailey, who is a transgender boy construed verbally as he by his family and as she by the narrator and her new friend, and also for Nate, notably in relation to their interactions with family members. Unlike the other protagonists, both characters express their desires dialogically, mainly in the verbal mode. Bailey's desire to wear a dress faces strong opposition by every member of his or her family, while Nate's desire to learn to dance ballet is constantly contested by his elder brother. The role of censor, reactor, is salient in Oliver's and Willie's profiles. These characters are construed as independent and self-constituted, fulfilling Stephen's description of a boy who reads for pleasure and who does not have physical prowess as is characteristic of the New Age boy. Finally, the role of behavior is crucial in William's subjective agency and his desire to have a baby doll, which is construed mainly by means of behavioral processes related to play pretend actions of looking after the baby doll. However, when scrutinizing to what extent the protagonists' profiles vary when they interact with the characters who embody male gender stereotyping, a quite different picture emerges. As we can see, this table shows the distribution of the protagonists' agentive roles when they interact with the characters in conflict with them. The observed differences between the distribution of agentive role types for each protagonist in the total count, as we have seen in the previous table, and those when in interaction as reproduced in this table, can be interpreted as pointing to how conflict is instantiated in its story and related to each protagonist's way of contesting social, that is to say family, peers, etc., pressures according to his subjective agency. Oliver's participation as actor shows a notable decrease in interaction, other roles being even absent. This is the protagonist whose agency is most dramatically affected by conflict. He's construed mainly as a censor reactor who witnesses stoically how his classmates, the boys, target him while keeping true to his desire to tap dance. In contrast, although Willie has a similar New Age boy profile, his agency shows an even distribution also in interaction, and he even responds to physical aggression, participating as a physical actor. Albeit through different means, the similarities of these two protagonists also converge in their social acceptance as acclaimed heroes at the end of each story. In contrast with Oliver, William's participation as actor increases notably in interaction. The subjective agency of this character is depicted as a disclosure of self-awareness about his desire to have a baby doll from the very beginning of the story. However, his father, brother, and neighbor keep on prompting him to participate as actor in stereotypical male gender roles, for example, playing basketball or setting up an electric train and making cardboard stations and tunnels. What he does obediently. Even so, he stays true to his desire along the story, which is finally fulfilled thanks to his Ali grandmother. Finally, Bailey's role as sensor reactor decreases notably as his or her realm of dreams and desires is developed notably when in bed at night, and at the end of the story when she finds a friend, and Ali as well. So, considering the differences observed among the agentive roles of the protagonists, this analysis has demonstrated that the picture book sampled represent diversity in the construal of challenging male gender identities. Consequently, this study is a contribution to a better insight into Shurba's concern about to what extent gender diversity is adequately reflected in picture books. The analysis has also shown that gender-inclusive picture books can counter narratives related to traditional masculinity by creating protagonists whose subjective agencies offer alternative models of masculinity along the New Age boy schema, showing how to contest existing social pressures for challenging gender identities like those represented by Bailey, Nate, Oliver, William, or Willie. The diversity present in gender-inclusive picture books, as the ones analyzed, reflect a range of the complexities of gender-variant male characters, which are liable to cater for different educational needs when addressing gender diversity in educational contexts. Thus, gender-inclusive picture books, as the ones presented in this study, seem to be appropriate educational vehicles, as Nicola Jeva and Scott called them, to bring to school the opportunity to challenge gender stereotypes rather than perpetuate them, as Froley recommends. If you are interested in the study that I have presented, you can find more results in these two publications. And here you can see a snapshot of the references that I have used for this study. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be very pleased to answer your questions in the discussion.